Right. What's up, everybody? We're here. First of all, thanks for joining us. And Joe, thank you for having us. Guy at the Movies. This is our panel discussing probably the current state of the comic book industry. And with me today, obviously, I'm Ryan. I'm from the Chumpcast. People call me Smithers.
Mark.
My co-host, Mark. I have two very special guests here. Daryl from the Watch It Like podcast out in LA. Okay. And E-Man from E-Man's Movie Reviews. Daryl, why don't you give us a quick description of your show, and then E-Man, you let us know what you're about.
Yeah, so the show is called Watch It Like. It was basically born from my co-host Danny and I just talking about movies all the time, comic books, nerd culture, and we noticed that there was a lot of negativity around movies. Oh, this movie sucks. It's the worst thing ever, whatever. And we decided, let's stop putting the onus on the movies themselves and put it back on the fans. So Watch It Like is literally watch this movie like this if you want to enjoy it. So don't go into Fast and the Furious expecting to see Schindler's List. You're going to be sorely disappointed. And so from that, we give reviews on movies and really just tell you, like, this is how you're going to enjoy the movie. If you're not ready for this, don't go see it, because I don't want to listen to you complaining, basically.
Very nice. Also, I would like to say I've never been disappointed by a Fast and Furious movie. Never. With that said,
no.
Tell us about your page, your channel, and everything else.
First of all, I have been disappointed by Fast and Furious movies, but those are for other reasons and another podcast probably. But yeah, E-Man's Movie Reviews. Yeah, you know what? Look, I got into this because I hate spoilers, so all my reviews are spoiler free, and I crafted everything to basically be just like if I was talking to a friend of mine. I'm going to tell you the good, the bad, the reason why you should or shouldn't see it, and leave it at that. And beyond that, the funny thing is that from reviews, the brand, the channel has grown into more than that, where now we're just doing everything from trailers to, theories for different movies and TV shows. And of course, if you happen to be on Facebook and you join the liveliest, best fan page ever, also titled E-Man's Movie Reviews, there's so many movie memes. You'll I do contests whenever I can. Speaking of which, I got one going right now, so you should absolutely go to that page. But yeah, that's what E-Man's Movie Reviews is all about.
Awesome. So I think that we would probably be remiss if we didn't discuss the biggest news of the week, which is the very unfortunate and untimely passing of Chadwick Boseman. Obviously made a huge impact on comic book movies, brought us Black Panther going all the way back to Civil War. And there's nothing really that I can say that hasn't been said about a great man who's inspirational to a lot of people, looking through his final tweets and the kind messages that he sent to everybody. But
knowing he was shooting all those movies while this was going on for the last 4 years,
I think we would be, again, remiss not to just throw up a cheers and say thank you for everything you did and rest in power, as they would say. Correct? I mean, it's so crazy that we just saw him in the Five Bloods and completely out of nowhere. So with that, E-Man, I know that you're a massive Black Panther fan. Can you just give me a little bit, just what he meant to you and what he brought to the big screen?
Oh man. All right, I'm gonna try not to get choked up. Look, when I first got into this, it was around 2015 or so. So this was a little bit before Civil War came out from Marvel. But prior to that, I was already a Chadwick Boseman fan. My earliest memory was the Chicago International Film Festival came out here. It was the first time I really had an opportunity to do a red carpet, and I got to interview him. And I'm telling you, that was top of the world. I was like, "Mama, I made it." That was it. I got to talk to Chadwick for like 3 minutes, but that was everything. And the guy was exactly as advertised: cool, kind, generous, funny. How they say you never want to meet your heroes. Well, this was like the polar opposite. and what he represented on screen through the character of Black Panther is iconic, especially because what he did on screen was pretty much similar to what he did off screen. You know, this is a guy that would visit cancer patients when nobody knew he was also suffering the same disease, you know, and he was giving hope. He was giving encouragement to these other kids, you know, that were terminally ill. And it's just remarkable when we have that opportunity to see someone embody all the things that we like to hope and expect, you know, people with high platforms to actually demonstrate. He was a living icon, you know, and I think his impact on the film industry, you know, as an actor, forget Black Panther specifically, but just as an actor, you know, this guy really lived and breathed the craft, you know. He you know, I strongly encourage people to go out and watch all of his past movies, you know, from 42, Get On Up, just all these things, Marshall as well, because whether you like the actual movie or not, one thing that's undeniable is this guy put everything into his roles. I mean, just he literally put it all on the floor. So, you know, it's a tragic passing, you know, especially given the fact that he was so young. I mean, he was 43 years old. He died of colon cancer. And, you know, it was definitely a gut punch, you know, for a lot of us in the industry, and, you know, for people like myself that like really closely identified with him. You know, I could see myself having a beer with Chadwick Boseman, you know, in that sense. And it's kind of like when someone like him goes, it's like, oh man, that really puts life in perspective, you know. So it's tough, it's difficult, you know, and one thing that I'm kind of, you know, taken back with is just that what he did with Black Panther, I think, is because I know a lot of people are out there like, man, what do we do with Black Panther? Where does it go from here? I think it's just a matter of like, you know, what he would have wanted. And in this case, I think he would have wanted that legacy to continue. You know, I think what Black Panther stood for was above and beyond just him. And, you know, and I think that that's something that whenever the time is right to even venture into that conversation of Black Panther 2, 3, or whatever, I know that he has set the bar to the point where now he'll never be forgotten. He'll always be remembered, and will always appreciate everything that he's contributed to the entertainment and into the real world. So Chadwick Boseman definitely is going to be missed. Rest in power, and thoughts and prayers going out to his family.
Well said.
Thank you. All right, so I don't think
shall we get talking?
I can't add anything to that. So why don't we just get into the the nitty gritty of what we're here to talk about, which is the state of the comic book industry.
So guys, we are we're going to get into hopefully a lively discussion of the state of the comic book industry, comic film industry. And I guess we'll start right at the base with, what would you say is the current state of comic book movies and TV as a whole? Are we seeing an oversaturation at all, or, where are we at?
Daryl, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, I think we're out of the what would be considered, I guess, the golden age of it. We've had the peaks of the peaks, but I think right now it's more about a consolidation of great stories. So there's plenty, like we have a million things to choose from, but I think now to really stand out, you have to be like exceptional. So like a Watchmen, like Doom Patrol, things that are pushing the envelope outside of just, bad guy beat 'em up type movies and TV shows. So like really, really pushing, I guess, the new standard and bringing us into like a new golden age. I think we're just on the precipice of that, of really exploring outside of, just a formulaic origin story, beat up a bad guy, and then a big bad at the 3 movies in.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I agree, because a while back I wrote an article about whether comic book movie fatigue is a real thing or not, because this was a conversation back in 2016 that they were having. Is this too many comic book movies? What are we gonna do? And the realization is, if we look back even to the early 80s or 90s, where there were terrible comic book movies and some good ones. The one thing that broke the comic book movie industry or the genre were bad comic book movies. We had a string of terrible ones that brought in terrible returns, that had terrible quality, and we were tired of that. No one ever asks if we're tired or if we have too many comic book movies when they're good or great. When Dark Knight came around, what did people say? Hey, we need more. When Avengers happened, we were like, hey, this is great. Do more. So it's not until we have a string of terrible ones that we really start to question this stuff. But yeah, as Daryl said, I do think we're at the point now where the bar is starting to raise, where it's like, okay, you can't just throw out something that's just there and it happens to have comic book characters, New Mutants. Now you actually have to give us something that's worthwhile, like Watchmen, or in this case, The Boys. Like that's some really good genre pushing stuff that can not only, and I think the barometer for this, right, is that it's not a fair question to ask a comic book fan if we have enough. The question is no, we're never going to have enough. I can
Absolutely
tell you,
not.
Yeah, I can tell you there are 50 other stories right now that I'd love to see adapted live action, right? Or animated even. But the real barometer is it at the point where it's bringing in outside people? Is it attracting non-comic book fans, to the genre? And I think that we are at the point where, because of the boundary pushing that is happening, you do have people with Black Panther, for example, never saw a comic book movie ever in their life, and that was their first one. You've got people that are sitting here watching Watchmen for the first time, didn't even know it was a comic book, So I think we're in a good place, but at the same time, I do think that right after the last phase of Marvel, for example, there's going to be a real proving ground, that's going to come about. Disney is starting the streaming shows and stuff. That's kind of new territory, because now, unlike the other Marvel shows that were out there, we really have to kind of see like, well, how does that work now that the shows are directly tied to the movies? On the flip side, you have DC. DC is finally hitting their stride, I think. It still has yet to be proven, because they advertise a real good game, but the movies have to actually still deliver. But there is a lot of hope, I think, that's established now. And this next year or two, I think, is really going to be a testimony as to whether this has some legs to run on or not.
That's a good point. DC's always been able to cut a mean trailer, but they can't necessarily deliver in the film aspects of it. Mark and Smithers, what about you guys?
I disagree from an animated film standpoint. DC kills it.
Oh, I agree.
I don't think we're necessarily talking that. Yeah. I'm loving where we're at currently with the state of comic book movies, especially the shows, because like Daryl mentioned, we're pushing the envelope. And one of my favorite things that I get from people that don't read the comic books, and me still being an avid comic book reader, is they're like, The Boys couldn't have been a comic book. I mean, look at this. Everyone's dying. Heads are exploding. I'm like, yeah, it was a comic book. You're thinking like DC and Marvel are the only people that publish these sort of comics, but they don't. And we're seeing a lot more shows. Watchmen is DC, but a lot more shows that are for the older viewer, which I'm having a great time seeing all these new shows that are getting put out, and the ones that are continuing. Like, I can't wait for The Boys season 2 in a week or whenever it comes out.
That's right. Yeah. So I think that the evolution that we've gotten has been more targeted marketing, whether it's, something that's aimed specifically at adults or something. I had a really hard time reconciling the fact that not every comic book movie was aimed at me, which is, I know, super selfish when you say it out loud, but it's true. Like, you think, I'm a comic book nerd. They're making a comic book movie. This has to be what I like. And that's not at all the case. And frankly, it doesn't really matter if we're sick of this. Like, we're going to keep getting these until these movie studios just stop printing money. Like, E-Man, you mentioned New Mutants. I don't know. The jury's still out on that, whether it's going to make money. But I mean, Fantastic Four in 2015, which was Josh Trank's version, widely regarded as one of the worst comic book movies ever. Yeah. And it still made money. And it's, we're getting to the point now where with things like The Boys and other stuff like that, we're literally doing parodies. It's doing parodies of itself, which is just another genre of comic book movies, and I'm totally fine with that, especially when it's good like that. So, I mean, and it's not new, really. Like, if you look back to the '90s, you had like Mystery Men, you had Orgasmo, Meteor Man, and stuff like that. That was always a parody of that superhero. So, I just think that if you're sick of it, you better learn to ignore it because it isn't going anywhere.
It's a good point. It's a good point. We talked a little bit, and I think E-Man brought up, the ups and downs of the comic book film industry in particular, looking at the 90s films that we got, especially when you're talking about like Schumacher's Batman and, again, people have different opinions on that. But, what's your earliest kind of comic book movie memory or TV, like comic book TV show memory? What kind of is like the establishing, cinematic adventure for you when it comes to comic movies?
I'll take this. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
And at the time, I had no clue that it was a comic book. Like, the Eastman and Laird stuff from the 80s is way darker than what you see. And if you go rewatch the original TMNT now, that was way darker than what people remember. Raphael almost died. People forget that. And I mean, if he had actually died, I probably just would have been scarred for life. That would have been another Optimus Prime Transformers animated movie type scarring emotional thing for me. And now that I'm older, or as I got older, I guess, I looked at it and it wasn't just that TMNT was a comic book. It was also that it was basically inspired by more Frank Miller comic books. A lot of people don't know that TMNT was basically inspired by Daredevil. It was Frank Miller's work on Daredevil and what was the other comic that he did? It was the 80s stuff. Ronin, yes, sorry. But that for me, like, if you look at the parallels here, like Eastman and Laird are the creators of TMNT, and they even canonically say, like, when Matt Murdock, young Matt Murdock, went to save that person out of the street, like from the goo that blinded him, it got into the sewers, got on some turtles and a rat, and here we go. Now we've got some radical bodacious stuff. I mean, they named Master Splinter based on Daredevil's mentor Stick. That stuff, to me, I can't get enough of it. Mark, what about you?
So I was actually going to say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I was born in 91, and that movie came out in 90. But from the earliest memory, it was that movie for sure. Because I think that was the only live-action superhero-related comic book movie that my parents would allow me to watch. But the one that impacted me the most would be Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man in 2002. So, yeah, I was 11 years old. And that was probably the first time I actually sat down and was like, I need more of Spider-Man. I need to pick up comics. I need just to learn more about this universe.
Mark is clearly the youngest one in the chat.
So, and that's great, though, because I'm sure it was vastly different for you guys growing up, what movies really impacted you. But yeah, for me, it was Spider-Man, but earliest memory would be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I mean, between that, the Tobey Maguire thing, like the animated series, the Spider-Man animated series where you see all the memes from now, that's what I grew up with. That and Batman the animated series, obviously, moving into Batman Beyond and stuff like that. That's what made me want to go to the comic book shop.
How about you guys, Daryl, E-Man?
Yeah. I'd say for me, I mean, Ninja Turtles, but I didn't know, so I won't count that. It would be probably Batman the animated series. Mm-hmm. Just thinking of like a cartoon that can be adult but still kids, and not like, it doesn't have to be adult in that it uses F-bombs and nudity or anything like that. But it was very dark and like had a mature tone to it. And I'm like all of 6 or 7 years old, like just eating my my sugar cereal and just like consuming it every Saturday.
Was that when you learned how to brood?
Yeah, that's when I was like, you know what? There's something to this whole brooding thing. People really seem to like you when you're just angry all day.
Life lesson.
Yeah. And then I would also say, speaking of Saturday mornings, is on the whole Fox lineup of like X-Men the animated series. Oh, yeah. Like I absolutely just like fell in love with Wolverine and Gambit. And actually, we went to see New Mutants last night, and my buddies and I were talking about Night of the Sentinels. Like, it's still by far one of the best 2-episode arcs of like cartoon television ever. And you know, I would say those memories are deeply ingrained. But to Mark's credit, Spider-Man has always been my number one character. And when that movie came out, I don't think I've ever been as excited for anything in my life. Sorry about my kids. But seeing that was like just literally life changing for me. I never had any idea that this could be possible. And then getting to see it, I went and saw it 4 times that opening weekend. I went like midnight showing, like the same next day. And I think I saw it all and up in its theater run probably 10 to 12 times. I felt like a 17-year-old girl seeing Titanic. Like it was absolutely just changed the arc of my fandom with both movies and comics.
That's awesome.
This is a safe space, right? Is it? Are you guys going to judge me? Like, if I told you that I went to see X-Men 3 5 times in the theater, am I going to get judged for it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't think so, because I think what we judge things like, or how we judge things when we were younger, you know, the movies I used to love and go see all the time are movies today that I'm embarrassed I went out and got the DVD when it was released, right? Like, it's just a different eye that you're looking at things with. And back then, when, you know, the X-Men movies were like the height of, you know, comic book movies for us at that time, it's what you rolled with.
And your selection is limited back then too. So it's not like, oh, well, why didn't you watch The Dark Knight 5 times? So of course I did, but that was years later. Right. So, and also how much you actually enjoyed it. That's the other part. If you're advocating for X-Men 3, then I judge you.
I don't know. I mean, like, there are certain movies I'd go back and watch, and I know they're bad, but the memory that, you know, the nostalgic memory that I had to it is enough to fill in that gap of badness. So, for example, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, you know, Secret of the Ooze. It's a terrible movie, but I watched that movie when I was a kid, and I was sitting there doing the ninja rap, the dance, and everything, and I'm not going to ever trash that movie because of what it meant to me back then, you know. But anyway, to the main question, yeah, you guys already stole all my answers. I mean, TMT, yeah, that was already there. Batman the animated series for sure. X-Men, my goodness. I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking about all the toys that I grabbed and had because of these shows. But in terms of movies, if it wasn't the first Turtles movie, I'm gonna cheat a little bit and actually give 2. Tim Burton's Batman. I was watching the heck out of that. It was a crowning achievement of mine to get the Batmobile, you know, at that time as a kid. So that was a definite staple. And then a couple years later, Blade sat here and I was just like, wow, you know, that was just I didn't know it was a comic book until I found out. And then I'm sitting here like reading all of it, you know, because what Wesley Snipes did back then to save Marvel to this day was just remarkable. He was entertaining, action-packed. It was just great. But yeah, I mean, look, the 90s were a really good time to jump in, or at least to get a taste of the potential of comic book movies.
Yeah, it was a really good time, simultaneously being a really bad time.
Yes, yes,
absolutely.
There were some misses.
I mean, yeah, sure. And I can't remember what year the original Daredevil came out, but that was, man, that hurt my heart so badly. I love that character so much. But yeah,
director's cut is good though. The director's cut is way better.
They didn't do electric buses.
That's a whole other story too. We're getting into this area
where
we're like, give us the director's cut of stuff, and that's not.
That's a whole other podcast.
Movie studios, it's not a good way to go. Like Sonic, okay, that was okay because
it was also a video game movie, and they haven't put out a good video game movie in forever. So
yeah, it's a slippery slope. When you start wishing for shit, you might get something you don't want.
I think back to like some of the 90s films that were cheesier. I don't know why they're like, I guess 90s is synonymous with cheese in a lot of ways, because when you look at like action films too, you know, last night we watched Mortal Kombat for the 25th anniversary, and that movie, like, it is what it is, but I'll still watch it every time it's on because it's a solid movie. But I remember, like, you know, Mystery Men was mentioned earlier. I think about Blank Man. Remember Blank Man?
Yes.
think about like Blank Man and
Meteor Man.
yeah, exactly. And Spawn was one that I watched a lot. I remember that.
I love Spawn.
Yeah.
I know it's not a good movie. I love this.
There's
still.
something about it.
I saw the potential in it because the cartoon on HBO. Whew, that was even better. Okay,
I mean, that was at the same time as like Aeon Flux and The Max, and
yes. And I was hitting puberty around that time, so it was a perfect mesh. It was perfect.
It was a great time for you, man.
Yeah, and you're a fan. What do you think of the new Spawn remakes? And
I don't like.
I mean, Mahershala Ali and no,
I don't like the direction of the Spawn movie only because of the things I've heard. I don't really think Todd McFarlane is a good fit to direct it. I'm totally fine with him being an executive producer, of course, and having his input. But from everything I've heard about it, in terms of Spawn not even being like the main character, he's like a background figure or something like that. I'm like, no, like I don't go to a Spawn movie to learn about the people around Spawn. I don't care about them. I want to know about Spawn. I want to know about all the supernatural stuff going on. Because that's what made the comic book so interesting. I mean, Spawn is literally fighting the devil and God. Like, that's the stuff I want to see. I don't want to see, this police officer dealing with the crime in the streets. I don't care, so that's like giving me a Gotham movie about the police. I don't care about that. I want to see Batman. So no, I don't care about that. But
you're not excited about the TV show?
The TV show is a little different only because there's a possibility Batman can still be in there. Because it does take place with Batman in his first year, unlike the previous Gotham show where it's just a little Bruce Wayne running around or whatever. So I'm a little more optimistic with that because they're also kind of tying that TV show into the movie as well. So different approach, a little bit more acceptable. But the Mahershala Ali thing, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm 100%. He could do no wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, but nobody will ever replace John Leguizamo as Violator.
100%.
No,
amazing.
I'm fine with him reprising the role too.
So, in talking about all these movies that we've seen in the past, and recognizing now that we're at a time where, as Ryan said, that comic book movies are going nowhere. It's kind of its own, powerhouse as the studios all try to scrap for things to adopt or adapt. What character, or whether that's a hero, villain, a supporting cast member, is there anyone that comes to mind that should have stayed on the comic book page, or anyone that you hope does stay on the comic book page that has yet to be made into a film or TV show for that matter?
You mean that we regret got a show, or
it could be regret or one that they haven't touched yet that you hope stays that way?
I can go. Regretted instantly was Iron Fist, and Ghost Rider with Nick Cage. That movie was horrible.
Come on,
what?
I hate that movie.
What? Get out of here! Get out of here!
I think, but I don't think there's necessarily a character that should stay on the page. I think with the advancement of all the CGI and visual effects that we have now, there's no reason you can't take a Dr. Fate. Or like if you were to ask me in 2000 if Thanos should be on the big screen, I'd be like, how? No. Right now, like, what do we have right now? Scorpion King type CGI.
Oh, there were way better examples. I mean, Ego the Living Planet. Think about that.
Yeah.
How the hell did they make that work for a movie? And that's probably James Gunn doing some, magic with that. But trust me, dude, there are plenty that do not belong on the big screen.
All right, let's hear something.
Galactus. Galactus is the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the way that they did it in the Rise of the Silver Surfer, but turning him from a like a guy who's the size of the sun, the devourer of worlds, who's supposed to be one of the most powerful characters in all of the Marvel universe,
and shrinking him down,
and then just turning him into a cloud of shit. That was so ill planned. And unless you get somebody like James Gunn, somebody with actual imagination that can turn that into something that actually fits on the big screen, I think that's
I don't know how Galactus works. Like even in the comics, I never understood why people tried to make him such a gigantic, no pun intended, like villain. I'm like, the dude is the size of whatever, and he changes sizes depending on whatever people perceive, whatever that means. I wouldn't want him as
sure, but it's an allegory for the entropy of the universe. Like it's not, hey, this is a guy who's just hungry. It's just chaos always ensues. Like something is always nipping at your heels that's going to murder you. And that's, I mean, frankly, that's like the soul of comic books, is something is always coming to get you.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say Jonah Hex. That, I don't know if you guys watched that Josh Brolin. Like that was one that
poor Josh Brolin.
Stayed. Yeah. It just wasn't good, like in any sense of the word. I really just did not enjoy, and I don't care for the character in the first place. And there wasn't like a buildup of the character being featured in like huge runs and, you know, really pushing out there. It was just like, oh, we got to option something. Fuck it. Jonah Hex. Let's throw it out there.
It's a good example.
I already mentioned Gotham PD because they're literally the worst police department in all of comic book history. Like they're the most useless police just ever. But I'm torn between two. One would be Catwoman. As much as I love, you know, pushing for diversity and all that, the execution was just terrible. Maybe it was premature, I don't know. But my own personal one that I just wish could stay on the comic book pages and never make its way on the big screen is Howard the Duck. I don't care about Howard the Duck. I don't know about Howard the Duck. I don't want to know about Howard the Duck. And I still don't care about him, even if you try to push him in front of me. He
loves Howard the Duck.
I love Howard the Duck, man.
I don't care. He seems like the most useless comic relief out there. I don't get why people like him. I don't get it. A lot of times I understand, like, hey, he's not my cup of tea. I understand. Hey, you might like that. I don't get it. So he can stay.
Okay. I mean, I think that you're onto something, like the comedic relief, the comic relief coming from pages to the big screen. Obviously didn't work with Howard the Duck, but you've got Deadpool, which made 2 really good movies and 1 abhorrent movie.
See, but Deadpool he can fight, you know, like he has actual purpose. What is Howard Duck's purpose? What does he do?
Howard the Duck is like Batman in that he's the world's greatest detective.
But he's a duck.
Okay.
He just can't kick anyone's ass.
I gotta say, I didn't see this going down like a Howard the Duck, unpacking the history of Howard the Duck with the Chumpcast. Hey, it works.
So what about what we want to see on the big screen? And I can kick this off. Nova has been a character that I've loved for a really long time, and it's kind of flown under the radar. There's been rumors that Nova's coming to the big screen for years.
We already had the Nova Corps in Guardians 2. They tease it. So
sure. And for anybody who's not familiar with Nova, basically what happens is the entire Nova Corps is wiped out, and all of the knowledge and power goes into that one helmet that's left. He finds other helmets and stuff like that. That doesn't really matter. But once they're all killed, like, it sets the stage for this guy who has the hive mind that is Nova. And so originally it was an alien. Then it was Richard Rider, who came from Earth, who's just kind of like a middle-aged dude who had nothing going for him. Most recently, it's been Sam Alexander, who's just a young kid from Phoenix, Arizona. I think that if they were going to do that, it would probably end up being Sam Alexander, because it sets up so that he could be kind of the it sets up perfectly for an intro movie, like a setup movie, where he's the guy who's got to figure all this stuff out. You don't have to worry about watching Thomas and Martha Wayne get murdered. You don't have to worry about Uncle Ben dying. You don't have to rehash this stuff that we've seen a billion times. But Richard Rider can still come in and play like the Tony Stark type mentor to his Spider-Man. And I think that would be a very riveting story. So, like, Sam Alexander is a young kid who's born kind of to an impoverished family. It's a single mother. He's got a younger sister. And I think that it's very down to earth in that sense, that he's just a kid who's trying to get by. He's still in high school. And I think that would make an excellent translation to the big screen.
You're missing the best part is Nova has the greatest superhero costume of all time.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty freaking badass.
It's pretty good. The helmet, like, I've thought a long time about making that actual costume, and I think that the the hundreds of hours that I would put into the helmet alone, like, just completely turns me off from that.
Perfect enough.
Shut up with your movie quality Batman costume. Get out of here. All right, Mark, who's yours?
This is an obvious one, but Red Hood. And casting wise, I think you can take who's the guy that did Under the Red Hood, and he voiced for the anime.
Jensen Ackles.
Yes. Yeah, he's in Supernatural, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think he would play. I just want to see Red Hood on the big screen. I want to see him brought into the Batman universe.
I mean, technically, we've already seen a Batman that murders people, which is basically just what Red Hood is.
Yeah, but Red Hood has a couple pistols, and it's just
whatever you're into, man.
I did a lot of The Wire, and Idris Elba is freaking amazing. And I get that Snyder had Martian the Manhunter, and it was played by, I forget his name, but I would love for them to bring in Martian the Manhunter at some point in the movies. I don't know if it's in the Snyder universe, if that's even going to happen anymore, but I would just love Martian the Manhunter. That's pretty much it for me.
Daryl, how about you, bud?
It's funny that you said Nova Corps, Smithers, because I was actually thinking, or Nova. I was thinking Green Lantern Corps, though, like or the Emerald Knights, just something in that to actually do it right, though. Not the Ryan Reynolds. That's one I guess I wish would have stayed on the page until they did it correctly later. But doing something like, what's the storyline when Hal gets all the rings, he kills all the Green Lanterns, steals all the rings, and then it goes to Kyle, and like I want to see that storyline. I guess
Blackest Night.
Is it no?
Is that Blackest Night?
Blackest
Or no, it was the one before.
Yeah,
that.
because Blackest Night is the Black Rings, the Black Knight
Right.
coming, reanimating or killing everyone and reanimating them. But yeah, something like that I think would be pretty damn amazing if you did it correctly and actually like built out the universe and actually showed the lore. Sorry, Brick's not here. Dipped into that lore though. It's such a rich story, and you can do so much with all the different colors, all the different virtues. If they actually just put some time and effort into it and didn't just pump out a popcorn flick.
Yeah, nice. So I'm gonna give you my favorite, and I'm gonna tell you a storyline that can win an Oscar. Okay, so my favorite, I want to see Static Shock. During DC Fandom, it was announced that they're in serious conversations or talks to making that happen. I absolutely want to see that. I think we got a taste of it. If anybody's seen the movie Slight with Jacob Lattimore, it's pretty much very close to it, Yep. So I totally would love to just see that for the representation, and because Static is actually a pretty cool character, not only as a teen, but if you keep going with it, when he grows up, he also becomes even better. You know what I'm saying? So I would love to see that on the screen. But let me tell you what can win an Oscar. I know we've had a ton of them already portrayed on screen. I want to see the Joker in the White Knight. You give me a Joker with the White Knight storyline where the Joker is fixed and he spins everything and pins the plight of Gotham in a political nature on Batman. And now you have some Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan, Joaquin Phoenix-esque stuff going on that's heavy with societal and political implications. You get the right actor, it's an Oscar immediately.
Do you think that can be done in one movie, E-Man?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, obviously you could, stretch it for like the part 2 or whatever, but
I would argue
that could be great.
I would argue that they've already tried to do that kind of with Lex Luthor, like the whole political aspect. Mm-hmm. Granted, he's not a psychopath that goes straight. Also, I want to point out that your original recommendation of Static Shock would inform so many people that his name is not Static Shock, it's just Static.
Static. Yeah.
Are there any origins? Because a lot of what you hear now are a lot of comic book fans saying, all right, I've seen enough of this origin. I'm done with it. If we're rebooting, Batman, if we're doing this and that.
Hang on. It's not a lot. It's every time I have to watch Thomas and Martha Wayne get murdered in an alley for the billionth time.
Okay.
The pearls falling.
And Uncle Ben. Poor Uncle Ben.
You have to remember, though.
No, I don't have to remember. I know his parents are dead. That's his entire personality. his parents were murdered. I don't need to see it again. Ask anybody in the world, hey, what happened to Batman's parents? And they know the answer. You don't have to show that again.
I was actually in a DC group and we were talking about this, and I just read the Three Jokers book that came out. It was like one of the most hyped up
really
like
good
Killing Joke type of comics to come out. And I was like, all right, we got Batman flashbacks to the crime alley. I'm like, that was unnecessary. And I had people in there arguing with me and saying like, well, you don't know like who's reading, and like people don't know Batman's history like that. I'm like, if they don't know Batman's history like that, just don't even pick up a comic. As shitty as that sound, but come on. It's like, yeah, we do have a lot of that. But
now, let me just give one small argument for it. And
go ahead.
Batman's parents is quintessential to who Batman is. Like literally till the day this guy turns 99 years old, his psychological trauma is that's his superpower. That's the exact reason why he's so focused. That's why he's so disciplined, is because he's never gone to therapy to get over that psychological trauma. And that's the one thing that literally makes him damn near superhuman. So it's hard to stray away from that psychological trauma. And to be honest, I don't think we've really explored that enough in the movies that we've seen so far. Yeah, we get the origin stories, but we've never really seen why Batman is so psychotic. Like, he's not just driven. Dude is a psychopath. There's a reason why the Bat family breaks up like every other year, because he's nuts. You know what I'm saying? We have not seen that. You know, he's a legit psychopath. I mean, just American Psycho, Christian Bale, that's Batman. Okay, that's him. He can smile, as Bruce Wayne and kill you right at night. So we haven't seen that. And I think his parents are quintessential to all of that.
I'm going to argue other side of that, though, in that Tom Holland as Spider-Man, probably one of the best portrayals. And we have not heard the name Uncle Ben, but you know enough to know that Uncle Ben died. Yeah. And there's little nods, with his briefcase and all that stuff, but they've never even touched upon it. Mm-hmm. And you still just know that it's influenced dramatically everything that Peter's done in the MCU. So I don't think you need to reflect it. You can maybe have just a conversation or something about it if it comes, whatever, but I don't think you need to keep showing it. I don't need to see the pearls again. That's really, at the end of the day, I'm just tired of the pearls and the gun.
Wow. Always the pearls. Uncle Ben's racing, just like, God damn it.
But even with that, they still, because the MCU basically replaced Uncle Ben with Tony Stark for him. Yeah. So even though, we're not seeing Uncle Ben die and stuff, and I'm totally with that. I don't need to see that. But it is important to see where these heroes are constantly drawing their motives from. And I think, especially with Spider-Man, I mean, literally in the first scene, he's looking at Tony's face. Every time I look around, it's Tony right there. That's where he keeps drawing his moral compass from, in some way, shape, or form. So I think we just need more creative ways, instead of drawing from the same well. Just find different ways to kind of be like, oh, that's why this guy is different than any other vigilante or any other person on the street. It's because they have this blank canvas to draw from or whatever.
I completely agree, and that's the excellent point is doing it in a creative way.
Yeah.
There's a really fine line that you walk when you're doing a comic book movie, because you don't want it to be a direct adaptation of the comic book, because if that's the case, then everybody's already read it, and you don't want it to be too far off the line, because then everybody's losing their minds because it's not what I read in the comic books.
Right.
So there is a fine line to walk there, and I think that Spider-Man probably did the best job of that, in that, you're kind of, like you said, you're kind of replacing Uncle Ben with Tony Stark, and that's a brilliant turn. That's a great way to do it. So keep doing stuff like that. Stop showing me Thomas and Martha getting killed.
Well, if we did it, then this might be, I guess, more directed at Mark to see what he would think. Incredibles 2, the dad who dies, he gets killed in a home invasion and gets murdered that way when he's relying on superheroes to save him. I think if you did something like that with Thomas, they go to the theater, they actually go through the alley, and they make it home safe. Then they get killed at night in their manor. That's a new way to show they had to die, cool, but it doesn't have to be just in the same fucking alleyway
I like
the same, literally the exact same thing all the time.
Change the scenario.
Yes.
But keep the same essence.
Yes.
I like that. Yeah.
But that opens up a whole other challenge, though, right? Like you get that with what Snyder's been doing and changing some of the specifics. That sets people off on a whole nother tangent with not staying true to the comics.
Like
while they
what?
may be staying true to, you know, the impact and everything else and the essence of the stories, those little changes further divide those who are watching these films.
Sure, but and I know that Joe, you guys did a talk on, you know, toxic fan bases earlier. There is no fan base that is worse than DC, and that is because even when they get exactly what they ask for, it's never what they want. They're never happy.
I disagree with that.
I kind of disagree, man. Star Wars still
Star
exists.
Wars.
Yeah.
Star Wars is out here issuing death threats, man.
I'll give you guys that. Star Wars, DC, everything else.
I don't know. That's pretty bold take here.
I just know Star Wars is number one. I don't know about everybody else, but Star Wars is definitely number one.
If we've learned nothing over the past however many years of the third trilogy. So guys, we're wrapping up a little bit in just another minute or two here. But I guess at the end of the day, we were talking about comics to film. I was someone who came into comic book movies as not having read comics a lot when I was younger, but the films led me to want to learn more about the stories that I was seeing and the origins there. Not necessarily, you know, the Waynes being murdered again, but you know, I knew that one. That's been cemented. But how about you guys? Like, what was your relationship with comics before the Marvel DC movies really took off, and now the other films are starting to come from page to screen? Has it improved your relationship with comics, minimized it? What's going on there?
E-Man, why don't you kick this off?
You know, well, earlier, you know, we talked about like what our introduction was, and it was like the TV shows and stuff for me. The TV shows propelled me into comics, and the very first comic run that I really started reading like extensively was Spider-Man. And the deeper and deeper I got into Spider-Man, the more opened up my mind, you know, to all the possibilities, you know, and I also learned the complexity of trying to jump into other comic books because I was like, oh, I love X-Men, but I had no idea where to start. X-Force, X-Men, Astonishing X-Men. Like, I had no idea where to start. So it started to kind of complicate things, whereas like the movies and the TV shows were a little bit easier to digest, right? But as I got older, I think one impact that ended up happening was, especially, well, you know, as I got older and pre-critic world, I started to realize like, oh my gosh, comics are opening up all the possibilities to all these stories. Post-critic, then I started realizing like, you know what, these have to be almost two indistinct, you know, or two distinct worlds, because I can no longer carry the expectation of what happens in the comics to translate into the movies. And just a very basic concept for comic fans, if you sit here and tell us 5 years ago, multiverse, we get it. You know, that's not a foreign concept because we've been ingratiated into the concept, you know, but for, you know, average moviegoers, what? Multi-dimension? Well, like, it doesn't register. And the pace of the movies and the TV shows has to go at a lot slower rate. So because of that different dynamic, you know, these worlds are kind of splitting up. And the impact that it's had on me is just basically changing my expectation. When I see something happen in the comics, now I know, okay, that's cool. It's going to take about 5-10 years before that can make sense in the real life, you know, big screen. So perfect example, Jane as Thor, you know, that's something that was in the comics. It was actually a really successful run. Amazing. You know, and even if you had a couple comic fans griping about, oh, she can't beat Thor or whatever, it still was successful. But now just the mere announcement of it 4 or 5 years later is kind of like, you know, ruffling some feathers because they're not accustomed to what the comics already established. So that's kind of where my impact with the comics and the movies are now. It's just that gap, just understanding with expectations.
I want to do a quick intro here for Remy, named after Remy LeBeau, aka Gambit, one of the X-Men. So,
Well done.
Mark, what do you think?
So I know we got to wrap up, so I'll make this quick. But I started reading comics since I was 10, 11, 12. And I would always, unlike E-Man, I would jump in at random points because my one thing is my mom would bring me after the dentist appointment to get a comic book. Didn't matter what it was. It could be Nightfall number 43, but it had Two-Face on the cover. So I'm like, oh, this guy looks awesome. I want to learn more about him. And that's kind of how I got introduced to different characters in different universes throughout all of comic books, whether it be Marvel or DC. But what I'm really excited for now is actually independent comics like Image, where we had Walking Dead. Those are getting adapted by TV production companies, movies, etc. And they're just some awesome stories. And it's a little scary at times too, because some of these stories are so. I'll say Saga, for example. There's some stories that are freaking amazing. Like I put the book down and I'm like, wow, that just blew my whole mind. And now you hear about a lot of these production companies picking them up, like Something is Killing the Children is one that just got picked up. That's a really popular independent comic. So I would say I'm excited for that aspect of the comic book film industry, but at the same time, it scares me a little bit because there are a lot of good independent comics that are for our viewership that are getting picked up. But at the same time, it's a little bit intimidating whether or not they're gonna butcher the story or do a good job with it.
I'll go even faster. Movies absolutely ruined my relationship with Deadpool because as soon as those movies came out, Marvel, which was technically, I guess now is Disney, wasn't at the time, but they were like, okay, we got to make this super mainstream. The old Deadpool comics were not mainstream at all. It was very dark. He was literally insane. Like I think Daryl, one of your favorite characters is Moon Knight, and the parallels that can be drawn there are many.
Insane.
But the way that they completely changed him from the anti-hero to make him into trying to be a good person absolutely ruined it. And I'll shut up now.
Daryl?
Yeah. For me, it's really helped me just get back into my love of comics and just reading them. One, because when they first came out, I had read all those storylines, so people come and say, "Hey, what's happening next? Who's this person? What's going to go on?" And something flash across screen, and I'd be all excited. And people are like, "Well, why? Like, why are you so freaking out that oh, the license plate is this number?" And so it's actually made me branch out and read a bunch of things that I'm really hoping get picked up. Things like Low, which is one of my favorite recommendations that I've had recently, and I'm like, that needs to be like a series now. Like that just has to get picked up. So it's just helping me to really expand what I was reading previously, because I really was just DC, Marvel, and I was like, all right, well, all these other things from Image are getting picked up. Let me just jump into everything and just getting out there. And then like Once in Future, which I know Smithers loves, and like that makes a perfect movie series. Like it's fantastic. So yeah, it's just really helped me just get back into that and sitting down and reading again.
Guys, I can't thank you enough for being here today and having this discussion. Definitely an awesome conversation to have, and one that unfortunately is contained to just 53 minutes right now, but could probably go on forever. So thanks again, Daryl and E-Man especially. Nice meeting you guys.
Thank you.
And we'll chat soon.
Thank
you guys.
See you guys.
Yep.